Welcome to Growth Colony, Australia's B2B podcast. I'm Alex from Xgrowth. Each episode, we bring you B2B founders, CMOs, marketing and sales leaders to find out what makes them successful and what was behind their failures, or as we like to call them, hard-learned lessons. If you enjoy the episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and share the pod with a friend you think could get value out of it. And of course, make sure to join the community Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack. That's enough from me though, let's dive right in.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. I'm Shahin with Xgrowth, and today I'm talking to Rory Boyle, Managing Director at Hampers with Byte, which was recently acquired by Pentel after running for 17 years. Now, I'm also super excited to talk to Rory. I'm a customer of Hampers with Byte and just made an order last week. And today with Rory, we're discussing how to measure and budget sales and marketing activities as a B2B founder. It's a tricky thing, especially a lot of founders might not have that sales and marketing background. And especially when it comes to budgeting, there is a fair bit of learning to go through. So I'm super excited to talk to Rory. Rory, thanks for joining us.
Yep, no problems at all. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So, let's start with this whole concept of budgeting. But before getting into the nitty-gritty and the details, when did you kind of start to realize you need to mature the way you approach sales and marketing? And what was the trigger point?
Yeah, if I go back sort of 3 to 4 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. I mean, we went from turning over sort of $5-6 million, that sort of mark, and we plateaued at that point for a little while. I'd started to invest a little bit more in some self-education and really took business a lot more seriously. And within that sort of 4-year period, we're up to, I think, around 28 million last year. And so I'd say it's been a gradual incline, particularly over the last 4 years, on really sort of getting deep with my metrics, taking a more micro approach to decision making that I was, as opposed to just sort of blindly chasing revenue, which was one of the greatest mistakes I made early on in my career.
Got it. Well, I definitely want to jump in and talk about some of those some of the ways that you did do self-education, but let's talk about the budgeting, right? So how do you budget your sales and marketing activities right now? How does your approach look like?
Yeah, so if you look at what I'm doing at the moment, let's say being a hamper company leading up to Christmas, let's isolate the sort of 3-month period between now and from September to Christmas, which is a really busy period for a gifting company. We'll have a fixed inventory of stock and invariably fixed inventory of hours. So we work back from there. So we say, okay, we might have a target to do, 35 million, say, over the period, or 30 million, whatever it might be. And we look at that and we say, okay, well, what GP can we make work? What's the historic data telling us? What can we charge? What are labour costs going to be? What are the incidentals? What are the wages? All those sorts of things. And we start to look at, okay, what profit's appropriate to be achieving from this turnover? And that's when we really start to look at advertising and sort of sit there and say, okay, what percentage of advertising is an appropriate amount to be investing in reaching this target whilst remaining profitable? So I have a spreadsheet that I run on a weekly basis, and each week I have a nominated amount in which I'm able to purchase in advertising. So how I work it really is, what percentage can I afford to be spending in cents and a dollar for buying opportunities and still remain profitable and grow and scale?
So that's a really interesting approach, and I feel like an approach that a lot of marketers might either don't take or they can't take, because you said that you start from profit. So you look at the profit that the company's making or is going to potentially make, or what you're targeting for the company to make, and then based on that, see how much money is kind of left and allowed for marketing. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, look, generally when you look at the key metrics of running any business, doesn't matter what it is, you're going to have, your fixed costs, you're going to have a GP, which is a variable, you have your labour, which is a variable, and we all want to increase our GP and profit and average order value and all those sorts of things, but there's generally a market cap, or there's some sort of set of limitations in which we're all faced with in business, that we can't just infinitely grow our GP and profit. So we have to say, look, realistically, this is what I can make from this product. This is what I can sell it for. This is the profit I can make out of it. And then you have to work backwards from that point, I think. You can't sort of start sort of saying, listen, I'm going to spend this amount of money without understanding, okay, what does it mean if I get past 7 to 8% in revenue in advertising dollars? Because unless you understand that, then invariably you may increase your revenue exponentially, but you're not going to make your profit. And if you're there for profit, or even if you're there for scale, you still have to understand what an appropriate investment in a dollar is for advertising. I don't think there's any other way around it, to be honest.
Got it. Okay. Well, I mean, you touched on it here, right? You touched on some of the key metrics that are very important from your perspective. What are some of the key metrics that you look at from a marketing perspective on a regular basis?
Yeah, so first and foremost, there's the ROAS figure. So we're looking at, when we're marketing, we're looking at, our return on advertising spend. But I also, when I'm working with my media buyers and on media buying, I want to be really careful that we don't get too focused on ROAS and forget scale, because invariably there'll be opportunities for ROAS. So, there's some really low funnel opportunities out there that we can buy as a B2B marketer. Let's say for me, gift hampers, Melbourne, next day delivery. Right. Okay. That is a low funnel activity. We're going to have a really high return on advertising spend for that and a great conversion rate. But we're going to be limited by scale, aren't we? So we're going to have to start looking up the funnel if we want to grow the company, and start looking at more generic terms, like maybe gift hampers, or maybe a little bit more generic, sort of gift ideas and gift for him and her, and make the right appropriate decisions based on the ROAS of those terms versus the scale that I can get into growth that I need to grow the company. But then the fundamental one to go back after we've done all of that is the LTV. So understanding every time I win an acquisition, even if I'm breaking even at the start of that acquisition, what the lifetime value of that customer is. Without understanding the lifetime value of my customer, I cannot make it. I can't spend money on advertising because I don't know what a lead's worth. I know what it's maybe worth on a first transaction, but if I don't understand what it's worth on a second, third, and fourth transaction with that opportunity, then you're limiting yourself to only being able to spend what the first transaction's worth, which you can be really handicapping scale and growth by doing that.
Very interesting. So you've sat down and calculated the LTV of an average customer, and a lot of your marketing spend and the dollars that you put into the marketing bucket are driven by that. Is that right?
Correct. So every customer that I acquire, I have an attributed LTV. And that's based on averages over a number of years. You can basically divide revenue by invoices if you want a really simplistic way to look at it. And it's not very hard. You can take out a few outliers, really big contracts you might have taken on to take out some of that. But in a pretty simple way, that's it. So then we start to say, okay, in a 2-year period, I'd like to keep it within sort of 2 to 3 year period, because we don't know, the world moves pretty fast, as we've seen. So I don't like to sort of be looking at for anything past 2 to 3 years in terms of LTV for a customer, because you never know what's going to happen. But in that sort of window, I'm happy to sort of say, okay, this is what this customer is potentially worth. So potentially in the first sale, it might be appropriate for me to only make a certain amount of money in profit, but knowing that I'm consistently getting the 2.5 times purchase from this customer means on the second and the next 1.5 purchases on average I get from the customer, I'm maximizing, I'm making 100% profit, and it's worthwhile.
That sounds great, Rory. I mean, there's very clearly a lot of depth to the metrics that you look at. Do you look at anything differently from a sales perspective? And when we talked about marketing metrics, do you look at anything from a sales perspective, or really you look at the sales and marketing in one bucket and the metrics really correspond to all of them?
No. I have a separate spreadsheet or an analysis on a weekly basis that I run for sales. So I guess there's 4 variances. I use a year-on-year comparison. Let's use an example leading up to, in the month retrospectively in the month of September. I'll have an analysis on the amount of new customers in revenue that I brought on over that month, and the amount of existing customers in revenue that I brought up in that month, and have a variance compared to the year previous. I then like to break it down by invoices as well, because revenue can be deceiving. 1 week can be inflated by a couple of really large orders from some existing customers, for example, and give you a misconception of how well you're doing in getting your existing customers re-engaged. So I'll break it down by invoice as well. So I'll have a comparison, sort of want to see, we might be 60% up on invoices for existing customers and 80% up on revenue. We might be 30% up on new customers versus the year previous, and 20% on invoices. But I think it's good to have that sense check. I have a weekly variance for retrospective periods, along with variance on forecasted figures, and my decision making's made from there. And look, we review those. I invariably review those details daily, but I don't recommend sort of looking at it daily. I think weekly's enough. Otherwise, you can get analysis paralysis.
Right. So you look at your numbers every week. Your sales and marketing numbers, you review them every week. Are there different metrics that you would look at over a longer period of time compared to what you look at on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I mean, financial year analysis is really important, and I look at sort of a 6-month analysis, but I write a formal report up to the heads of my team every Monday morning with what I've seen in all our reports. I like to put it in writing. They don't necessarily, a lot of people don't reply, and there's a lot of words there, and my thoughts and feelings. I put some comments on how I think we're tracking, what I feel the themes are, what I'm seeing and not seeing. It's a good exercise for me to be able to articulate it to my team, but also just articulate it for myself and really understand what I'm doing and really get in that rhythm. But yeah, for me, it has to be at least on a weekly basis. And I have a spreadsheet. We have our team has a traffic light spreadsheet with metrics on it that is filled in on a weekly basis. And there's a target, for example, ROAS figure that needs to be achieved that we have a target to achieve. So in each week, I need to sort of go in there and put a number in, and it's rather green, yellow, or red. So, you're getting that check every week. So yeah, a week maximum in terms of analysis.
Got it. Have you done this kind of on your own, or have you brought external help? How have you found the process of kind of developing this system? Was that all on your own, or there were like agencies that you got involved? How does that look like?
Yeah, no, look, to be honest, I brought it to the agency, this approach. One of the other things in terms of the sort of the media buy and advertising that I also do with B2B is, I mentioned earlier that we actually, we're forecasting every week what percentage in a dollar we can spend. But I also have a bank mechanism that I build in there as well. And basically what that is if we're ahead of budget, say I've budgeted to spend 8% of $1 million, let's say, and it's $80,000 of revenue of bank to spend in a dollar. We get there by spending 6.5%, $65,000. Well, then I'll create a banked column. So then we've got a banked $15,000, and that bank column means that we can reinvest at another time. So it's money up our sleeve in terms of advertising. Now you can take it away as profit or do whatever you want with it, but I like to have a banked column there so I can know if I am running ahead, that money's there, and in tougher times, more competition, I can reinvest it. I brought this to my marketing agency. I meet with them. So my AdWords media buyer, I've got an in-house Facebook buyer, and I do my own LinkedIn advertising. But I brought this to them to keep them 100% accountable, and they're really good at what they do. But it makes it really clear for them, and it means that it's cutting through the noise for these guys to have to that they're dealing with a lot of other clients working off this model, and we can really dive deep on what success looks like, because they know what they need to achieve. We can and it's the best way for a really good relationship. Everybody knows what success looks like, but it's not a model I picked up off anyone else. I guess it's just been built on mistakes that have been made over the years and ways I think I can improve them.
Mistakes. Great segue into talking about mistakes. What have been some of the big mistakes that you have experienced or you've made in this process of getting to this level that you are today? What comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I sort of talk about those numbers of where we were 4 years ago, and I say, well, look, we've been in business for 17 years. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to work out that there's been some wasted years and wasted opportunities. Look, for me, not understanding the correlation between profit and revenue, not properly understanding my numbers and metrics, that's probably the biggest one, is chasing growth without having a clear eye on a bottom line, not actually budgeting appropriately for periods, and not actually breaking up our costs, not tracking what success looks like on a weekly basis. All of those things that I used to just sort of kind of feel, I feel like we're going okay, and it's kind of gut instinct stuff. It costs me a lot of years, a lot of money, a lot of success. And that's what I've learned from. And then just like when you realize that you spent 5 years or 6 years just running on a spot in a lot of regards, while others, your competitors and so on, and other people in the industry grew, then you realize you've wasted that time, and the mistakes that you made have cost you that. It really incentivized you to get it right and to really implement, systems and processes like this in place to ensure that, you're not wasting any more years, not wasting any more weeks, because that sucks.
That makes sense. It does make sense. And I know in the business community and the founder community, this is a big thing when you look at a competitor, just like you said, and they're like, oh, wow, when did they start? What was the start date? How many employees do they have now? How many employees did they have before? And doing those comparisons can be paralyzing, but also it definitely tells you that there are areas that you could do better and increase the hustle. Obviously, you don't see the full picture, but I know that the comparison game is strong in the founder community.
It is, yeah. It is, and one of the biggest tricks there where you can get lost is tracking revenue. You get somebody gets interviewed and they say we're turning over 40 million. You think, oh, the turnover 40 million, and you make a presumption of what the profit's going to be. That can be misleading, or you can underestimate a competitor who might be turning over a hell of a lot less, but it's making some really good profit. And, you sometimes hear these things through the grapevine. Maybe a company goes public and the numbers are released, and it can be a bit of a revelation as to what is possible in your market as well. But yeah, I think that like those top line figures of, revenues vanity, net profit sanity is pretty true. A lot of people like to talk about revenue figures, but unless you're making a profit from it, it doesn't mean a hell of a lot. And having gone through a recent acquisition with the company approaching us, certainly profit and EBIT is the biggest driver to a sale price.
Those are the numbers that everybody look at. Yeah, very true.
Correct. Yeah. In the end of the day, when you sit down at the end and heaps of founders can probably relate to this, and they say, okay, I've had an awesome, you have a great year. We grew 30% in revenue. And then you sit down at the end of the financial year with your accountant or financial advisor and actually get a look at what that bottom line figure is. And when it's not what you hoped it was going to be, you pretty soon forget the revenue, because all you think about really, all that matters is the profit you're taking away from the business. I mean, obviously it depends on your strategy, if you're looking for scale or whatever it is, but that's a feeling. I've sat in that accountant's room many a time and been underwhelmed by what number I saw at the bottom, and I soon forgot what the revenue figure was.
It could be very deflating experience.
It is. It sucks.
When you feel like you've done amazing, and the accountant is like, you're going to go out of business if you keep doing this in the next 6 months.
And that's that's the danger as well, is when you're waiting to the end of the financial year to understand what your numbers are, or when you're getting advice, maybe once or twice a year, and you're not getting the opportunity, you realise, fuck, that's a year wasted, or it's 6 months wasted. Had I been on top of this cost or understanding this earlier, I'd be in a different position and let it get away from me. And that's why I just bring us back to the metrics and why it's so important getting a live snapshot of where you are. So before you go and sitting down with that account exactly what you're coming out with. You know what your GPs are. What your ROAS figures are, growth numbers that are being made profitably, and all that sort of stuff. So you don't have to have that moment when you say to your accountant, did you get it right? This is messed up, and you count it again. And I've done that. I've done that a couple of times, yeah.
Oh, I hear you. We touched on a lot of mistakes and things that you've changed. If you go back, how would you do things differently? How would you, we've as I said, we've covered a lot of things, but, is there something else or is there something that comes to mind in terms of, if you go back, let's say 4 years ago. So I'm talking about when you decided to change things, right? When you when you really made the decision that you need to grow faster or grow more profitable. If you go to the beginning of that period, how would you do things differently leading up to today?
Look, I think what I would have done differently a lot earlier was isolating what I was good at and what I wasn't good at, and be willing to invest in bringing in people to address my weaknesses. So that might be a VCFO, because I have a I wouldn't say elementary understanding of reading a P&L. I can read a P&L, but in terms of accounting and internal number analysis, it's not a strength. So doing that sort of stuff without the proper advice, help, bringing in a really great creative team, instead of sort of trying to running lean in that department to save costs. focusing on what I do best or what you do best, I think is the key. That's what I should have been doing at the start. Just focusing on that area, that the real USP that you bring to your business. Like for me, if I'm going to start up a company, you always look and say, okay, what's my unfair advantage? With everything, it's always, what's my unfair advantage? It probably retrospectively took too long for me to spend 100% of my time on my unfair advantage of the stuff that I'm actually quite good at, instead of spending 40% of the time on dealing with sales inquiries where that time would have been better spent working on the business instead of in it and just chasing revenue. And they're the things retrospectively that would have really changed the course of the growth of the company a lot earlier.
So does that mean like you were kind of, I can't find a better word, but like half-assing it in terms of bringing a CFO or, a creative team? Is that like you were saying, oh, I'm going to save some cost here, I won't invest too much? Like what was that mentality? Like what were you telling yourself that you right now say you were focusing on your weaknesses?
Well, I think I was letting fear get in the way of my decision making and anxiety get in the way of decision making. Taking on a full-time hire, a killer marketing manager as opposed to an intern, or maybe a great brand manager. Actually going out there and saying, listen, I'm committing to this wage. And it's scary when you have to do that, because you're thinking, okay, we're going to have to bring in this much money and this much more money to pay for this resource and then this much more to be profitable from it. So I'd probably spend a lot of time letting anxiety and hesitation get in the way of my decision making and not making the right decisions because I was scared that I was going to take on these hires or bring on this staff that were going to, I don't know, I wasn't going to be able to fulfill what I'd promised to them bringing them over, and maybe a concern I was going to be able to absorb their costs. And I think probably that, yeah. I think I don't think it was half-assed. I think it was a real hesitation to take real risks. When really you look at it, it's not actually that big a risk. You take on a wage, you don't pay their whole year's salary in the first week. That's the reality of it. And someone once told me that, and it was a bit of a revelation to me when I really thought about that. It's like there is some margin for error there if it doesn't work out. So
yeah, it's very true. It's hard. I've definitely been in that situation where you're like, oh my God, hiring this person, would it work? What will happen if it doesn't work? How have you kind of developed your own capability to be able to take more risk and not be kind of paralyzed by the fear of this might not work out and therefore let's just keep quiet? Have you figured anything out to combat that?
Yeah, there's two sides of it. I don't want to keep going back to the well on this, but properly understanding numbers and metrics and what success and failure looks like is a great way to sort of be assured of your decision making and be assured of what you can reinvest and you can't. Understanding your numbers is the number one assurance tool there, and that's what helps you sleep at night. But then on an emotional level, because we're all human beings, and the concept of taking risk, I reckon probably for me, once I sort of got my roots down, bought a house, got to put a bit of a dent in the mortgage, I sort of says, okay, look, let's have a bit more of a crack here, am I going to make this work or not? I guess there's probably that feeling as well. Probably moving from this kind of, I've got 3 kids now, so moving from the social years and really sort of saying, okay, well, I really want to make a career out of this and be more business focused as well. I guess they're probably the emotional aspects of my decision making that helped me sort of get there, yeah.
Got it. Rory, at the beginning of our conversation, and this is the question I want to ask before we jump into rapid fire questions. At the beginning of the conversation, you said, you did a lot of self-education and basically upskilling yourself. How did you go doing that? What was kind of the resources that you relied on heavily? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, definitely. So right on 4 years ago, after Christmas, I got on a plane. I reached out to the owner. I identified the most successful gift hamper company in the US and the most successful gift hamper company in the UK. And I thought, I'm just going to go and I got in touch with them. Said, listen, I want to meet up. I didn't want to sound too desperate and say, listen, I'm flying to UK and US just to meet you. So I was like, I'm going to be in the UK. Can I meet you? And that, they both said yes, and they were both, really willing to do it. One of them was based out of Portland and in the US, and they're a really, really big company. And look, I flew all the way to there for 2.5 hours of discussion, and we kept in touch, but it just, we didn't really I mean, it certainly wasn't really worth the investment of time or effort. But when I went to the UK, the gentleman that I met there from a company, and I'll gladly name them, Virginia Hayward, a man called Sam Hayward, best hamper company in the world, I think, that do amazing things. And he like really embraced me that day. He moved me from department to department, then showed me what they got, because they worked on a much larger scale than we do, from department to department, on how they do things, what they do, how they measure how they measured their metrics and their for their advertising was remarkable. They literally had a 25-page report on each campaign in a binder presented on a monthly basis. It's just brilliant. So yeah, that self-education was probably going out there and seeing people in parallel industries. We're never going to be competition. I was never looking to move to the UK, and they understood that, and they had no interest in moving to Australia, and sort of trying to share notes, I guess. And I've done that. I had a company from New Zealand contact me recently who was doing the same thing with us, and I've learned stuff from him, and he's left stuff from me. So I think sharing ideas with people from parallel industries is pretty powerful. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you flew to the US for a 2.5-hour meeting. And I
spent 2 days. I got there 2 days early. I just want to be sharp. I want to be sharp. So I didn't want to so I stayed there 2 hours. I'm revving up for this meeting. I turned up and I didn't know what was going to happen. I was really hoping that, I was going to be able to spend some time with them, and but they were really, look, and quite rightly, they were pretty protective of their intellectual property. And it was, invariably, they probably had some suspicions of what my motives were, maybe. I'm not sure. So that was all very superficial. But it is what it is. You win some a little bit. The second one, there's some real trust involved. And, since then we've met up in China with our buying, when we've gone to fairs for stock buying, and we're in touch regularly. And it was super valuable for me. We're having that UK relationship, especially when COVID hit, because they were kind of like a month or a month and a half ahead of the curve versus Australia in terms of how COVID was affecting the gifting market, the society, the economy. So straight up, I was on the phone to him saying, what's happening in the UK? And working a presumption, we're going to see really similar things here. And we did. And it was incredibly valuable to have somebody in my industry doing exactly what I do, giving me a month's worth of notice on what's happening for them. And that was a huge demand in gifting, because they went into lockdown and online just exploded. Helped me with my buying, and that decision just to go and see him is paid it tenfold.
Wow.
So taking a chance at just doing something out there, it's worthwhile.
I love it. That is such a great story, Rory. I absolutely love that. Okay. Now, before I want to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions, but before I do that, is there anything else that you think I didn't ask, or you think it's worth covering with regards to budgeting for marketing and sales?
I'll tell you what I love. I'll tell you what's incredibly valuable, and something I've never really... Look, I'm big on digital advertising. I'm probably not, when it comes to sort of... And that's because my AOV, it might be $3,000 mark. It's not sort of $30,000, $40,000 mark. Average order value, that is. That I steer away from things like billboards, newspapers and magazines, traditional forms of marketing, radio. That doesn't make sense to me. But what I love, I think, is a bit of a hack that people kind of avoid, is remarketing. Remarketing, if you kind of have a look, whether it be on Facebook or whether it be on Google, and you look at like your costs per impression for remarketing, and you can get, if someone visits your site, or and you can get in front of an audience of thousands, tens of thousands for $500, $600, and they're like one click away from coming to your website. And I see businesses spending like $30,000, $40,000 on a billboard that you're driving past at 100 k's an hour, and you don't get to just like touch and jump straight into the site and get ready to purchase. I think that the concept of remarketing being like a billboard, and take that and treat it like that, and a really cheap access to a billboard is a great approach, and that's why I'm really big on remarketing.
Remarketing and retargeting. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I totally agree with you that I think you're right. It's very cheap, but it's very high intent individuals that you could retarget, and they've looked at you already. There is some interest there, and you could target them at a very low price. So I love that. I love that. Okay, let's do some rapid fire questions. The first one I want to ask you is, what is one resource? It could be a book, a blog, a podcast, a talk, whatever it is, that has fundamentally changed the way you work or live.
Kevin KD Dorsey on LinkedIn, out of the US. Best B2B marketer, salesperson I've ever come across. Employed him as a mentor for 3 to 4 months, and he revolutionized the way I think and approach business and sales and marketing. LinkedIn, KD Dorsey, or Kevin Dorsey, his name is. Look him up.
All right, we'll definitely do that. Thank you very much for that. So question number 2, if you could give one piece of advice to B2B marketers, what would it be?
Yeah, don't get on the paid advertising crack pipe. Don't get on that Google AdWords crack pipe. How do you do that? Lifetime value of your customer. Like, if you start getting in a situation where you're relying on a cent in a dollar by buying every lead that you haven't got a sustainable business. You're addicted to paid advertising. You have to make sure that your strategy of winning leads is built around treating a customer like an acquisition, not a sale. And that acquisition is something you harness and garner more revenue from after you paid your initial buying price.
Got it. That's a great point. It is very addictive, those platforms, especially Google. Okay, question number 3. What are the influencers that you follow in the kind of B2B marketing and sales space?
I've started listening to Growth Colony, which has been great.
That's awesome.
It's been really good. Some just interesting people out of the US generally on LinkedIn. Different people, subject matter experts on copywriting or B2B marketing or sales or media buying. You follow one and they'll invariably be in touch with another and another. So I think LinkedIn's a really good place to follow.
It is. No, I do agree, and we've found amazing people and amazing connections on LinkedIn as well. Last one is, what is something that excites you about B2B today?
I would tell you what I'm incredibly excited about B2B market, more so than any other period in the 17 years I've been involved in it, is that the deck has been completely shuffled from COVID. The way businesses operate, run. For businesses like, if you look at employee wellness, what was traditionally delivering fruit into offices and office supplies and employee satisfaction that was done from the 9 to 5 and ways businesses really cement themselves over the years. For a lot of businesses, okay, that's off the table now. And now businesses are looking at completely new ways to do business or recognize employees or whatever it might be. And there's this opportunity for startups or for businesses to jump into openings that, the first one to get in there and to really consider this opportunity can make it big. And some of the big boys that have just owned spaces, well, they've had to regress and there's so much opportunity. I'd say that's what it is, because everything's changed and now it's about picking the eyes out of where the opportunity is. So yeah, for me, that's it. This is a really great, and it's a great time to lose as well, because if you're doing really well, if you continue to do things you always did and the environments change, you can lose, but there's a great chance to win. So for me, it's exciting.
It sounds like another business idea coming up, Rory. That's what it sounds like.
Maybe.
No, it sounds good. Look, this has been absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think there was some real examples and real life stories there that I think a lot of the listeners can take away and get inspired by. So I really appreciate you jumping on and giving us your time.
No worries. I really appreciate it. Thanks, X.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving us that 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and sharing the pod with a friend. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please make sure to join the community Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack. growthcolony.org/Slack. Thanks again for all the support, and we're looking forward to seeing you again in the next one.